Today's guest is someone who has quietly become one of the most respected voices in strength science and blood flow restriction training. Dr. Nick Rolnick is a doctor of physical therapy, performance specialist, researcher with over 70 publications in BFR, and the founder of Human Performance Mechanic. He's also the CEO behind Sport Gripz Revolution 2.0, a premium grip training device recently launched on Rogue, and someone who has successfully built 3 thriving lanes: clinical practice, product innovation, and global education. What I respect about Nick is that he didn't just jump onto trends. He helped legitimize an entire field. He's been involved in blood flow restriction training for over a decade, starting in bodybuilding circles long before it was mainstream. And he has helped shape the scientific conversation around mechanical tension, hypertrophy, and how muscle actually grows. But beyond research, Nick represents something bigger: how to stay relevant as a clinician in a rapidly evolving performance world, how to balance publishing, building, treating, training, and still evolve personally as an athlete. Today, we're diving into the science of muscle growth, the evolution of BFR, entrepreneurship in rehab, and what it really takes to build authority in an industry.
It's taking exercise that would normally take 100 reps to reach volitional failure, and it gets them there at 40 to 50% of that. So 40 to 50 reps. It's because the business model and the constraints that they're in right now are such that if people are in pain, they're not going to come back. People just want to be told what to do. And I've trained thousands of clinicians, both in person and through my online course offerings. And that's a common theme.
Dr. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Quite the intro, I guess. Huh?
Well, I do my best. So, you've said mechanical tension is likely the primary driver of hypertrophy. What does that actually mean in practical terms?
For those that aren't familiar, Dr. Schoenfeld and others, but really predominantly Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, back in, I believe it was 2010, published a paper theorizing that there are 3 main mechanisms that govern growth: mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage. And I think that as the research has evolved over the last couple decades, decade and a half, we can be more confident in mechanical tension and less confident in metabolic stress and muscle damage as drivers. So when I say mechanical tension is likely the driver, as a scientist, it's hard to function in absolutisms, but I will say that it's something that I'm pretty confident on. It's an abstract concept, but from if you zoom in with a microscope, mechanical tension is simply the conversion of this force that a weight would exhibit. So, for example, you're doing a dumbbell curl, right? When you're trying to move that weight, you have to overcome this pulling force, this force that the weight is going to be bringing, from gravity exerting on your body. And so what happens is in the concentric or the muscle shortening part of the contraction, you're getting these sarcomeres, which are the fundamental, the contractile unit of the muscle tissue. They have to shorten. And when they shorten, they're pulling on intracellular structures that then recognize that and convert that mechanical signal, the mechanotension, into a chemical signal, which is going to then drive the biological processes of muscle growth. When we think about mechanical tension as the primary driver of muscle growth, then we should aim to, in our training, to maximize mechanical tension. And I think we understand there are different situations in which mechanical tension can be maximized or at least encouraged, and those are the situations that we should probably strive to achieve in our training.
Why do you think that metabolic stress driver, why was that hanging around for so long?
It still hangs around.
Oh, it does.
If you I guess take my area of expertise, which is blood flow restriction,
Yeah.
which maximizes metabolic stress
Right.
as a way to drive muscle growth. But I think the issue comes down to there's a lot of concepts and there's a lot of things that if you're trying to make the statement that mechanical tension is the primary, or in my situation, I would say the sole driver of muscle growth, that you need to take a step back and you need to understand how muscles are thought to grow, the stimuli in which they are able to grow, and then, okay, how does then muscle damage, how does metabolic stress then fit into the equation? And some of that has to do with, getting into the granular science of, all right, we have the sarcomeres, we have actin and myosin overlap. All right, what happens with a concentric contraction? What happens with an eccentric contraction? What are the ways in which, mechanical tension, which is a single fiber phenomena, not a muscle phenomena, which is also another area of confusion, right? You can have high muscle tension but low fiber tension, in the sense of I'm moving something, really quickly. The whole muscle has to engage.
Right.
But from a single fiber perspective, because the weight is moving very quickly, the single fiber mechanical tension is actually not that high. But you can have high single fiber tension and high muscle tension if you're near the end of a set, regardless of the load, where you're having a lot of muscle fibers that are activated, but the muscle is shortening very slowly,
Right.
and thus the muscle fibers that are recruited are all undergoing high levels of mechanical tension, and thus can stimulate hypertrophic pathways. But when you think about it with BFR, then you have to think, okay, well, if metabolic stress is a driver of muscle growth,
Okay.
then if we isolate metabolic stress, then theoretically it should give you better results than simply, a process that doesn't have any mechanical tension whatsoever. So for example, researchers have looked at trapping metabolites. These are normally occurring molecules that are byproducts of highly anaerobic ways to create energy. Because when you're recruiting these type 2 muscle fibers, the fibers that are predominantly responsible for growth, they are not going to function solely on oxygen. In fact, they might not function on oxygen at all. They might function on anaerobic metabolism, so without oxygen, to be able to generate energy really quickly so they can contract very quickly. And thus, what you end up seeing is that when these muscle fibers are repeatedly recruited, is that they generate these metabolites. And so the initial thought in the literature was like, okay, well, we see that at the end of a set of exercise, high levels of metabolic stress, typically, measured in lactate, is the most common, but you can measure it with inorganic phosphate. You can measure it with other, even potentially like calcium, because higher levels of calcium signal that there's more electrical impulses that are being delivered to the muscle, and thus, are responsible for inducing that contraction cycle with actin and myosin, etc. But generally, lactate has been the big thing that they've observed, or hydrogen ions. And so, like, they've seen, oh, well, at the end of a set of heavy exercise, for example, we see high levels of metabolites. So therefore, with repeated heavy exercise and high levels of metabolites over time, that therefore metabolites must be responsible for growth.
So they're making a correlation based on what was showing up.
Yeah, and so what you can do
growth.
And again, the door is not completely shut, but it's near fully shut in my opinion. But again, I hold the right of refusal if I see a good study that kind of refutes this, but I just haven't.
Right.
But what you can do then is say, okay, well, in order, you have to try to dissociate, and that's the problem with human research, and even in this theoretical model, is you have to differentiate between the what's happening with metabolic stress, and then what could happen with mechanical tension, and then if we're thinking about bringing in muscle damage, what's happening with muscle damage. It's very hard to be able to isolate all three of those.
Right.
But I'll go through a couple of examples as to why it points more and more to mechanical tension and less to metabolic stress and muscle damage. Is that if we, for example, keeping with what we said before about high load exercise and the observing high levels of lactate and hydrogen ions, well, then theoretically, if metabolic stress is a driver of growth, well, then if we trap those metabolites after the exercise is over, right, where theoretically we've now captured all of the mechanical tension, and now we're just eliciting more and more metabolic stress for longer, that we should observe more growth.
Right.
And we don't see that. In fact, in the studies that I've seen, which there are acute studies, but also longitudinal studies where they've trapped this over time in a bicep curl task, that they actually see no growth. In fact, it actually might even be less growth in women rather than men. Although, again, it was small values or whatever. But nonetheless, we don't see an additional growth response. So if they were truly anabolic, we would expect that there to be growth.
You need to be growing.
Second, right, if we can see that in the absence of metabolic stress, we can still see muscle growth. And that's what happens with eccentric exercise.
Right.
We see very little metabolic stress or elevations in lactate because, and this goes back to what I was saying before, all the necessary pieces of information that you have to have some knowledge of in order to form a conceptual model that would point towards mechanical tension being the likely sole driver of muscle growth. Because we see that with eccentric exercise, as long as it's loaded heavy enough, we don't get high levels of metabolic stress, and we can get similar levels of muscle growth.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. As a concentric exercise with high levels of metabolic stress. So that takes that out. Then you get to muscle damage, where any form of exercise that's unaccustomed has the potential to induce significant amounts of muscle damage. That doesn't necessarily mean that the muscle damage is responsible for growth. Right. And so what happens is people would say, okay, in the beginning of a training period, we tend to see highly damaging bouts of exercise with elevations in muscle protein synthesis, more specifically like myofibrillar protein synthesis. So that's specifically what's happening, the building of the actual myofiber, the muscle fiber. We tend to see that there is an elevation in muscle protein synthesis response and muscle damage. And over a long period of time, that then leads to growth. So then the thought was, oh, we need muscle damage in order to be able to induce muscle hypertrophy. And it turns out that in the initial stages of exercise, there are higher levels of muscle damage, but that's simply due to the lack of a repeated bout effect and the novelty of an exercise. Right. And over periods of time, even when we progressively increase the load, we don't necessarily observe the same level of muscle damage that we observed in the beginning of an exercise session. Right. And so if we can completely take out muscle damage, which, by the way, we can do in applications of blood flow restriction, for example, yet we still see growth, then it clearly can't be something. It's like is it necessary or sufficient? And it's the concept that like you can observe something and in sufficient quantities, and you could potentially see the finding that you're looking for. But is it necessary? And I think it goes back to with mechanical tension, it has to be necessary to see growth. Why? Because, for example, if we don't do anything, we don't grow.
Yeah.
Right? So there needs to be a stimulus that's given to create the impetus for our body to adapt, and thus, in the situation of growing muscle, grow muscle. And that's where you can go and you can say, okay, well, in what situations now can we observe mechanical tension? And again, it's an abstract concept, but you can then see high levels of mechanical tension in a very fast moving, well, in multiple situations, but in very fast moving eccentric exercise where single fibers are undergoing high amounts of tension because they're not able to completely prevent the movement of the lengthening of the contraction. So the muscle fibers that are recruited, which are a lot, everything, are undergoing high levels of tension. Or in a submaximal eccentric where you get this de-recruitment, so it's not as heavy as a relative, concentric contraction performed at the same intensity. So you're getting a de-recruitment, so you don't see the same amount of muscle activation, but the muscle fibers that are activated are undergoing high amounts of tension. Or in the concentric phase, where you're moving the weight very slowly despite high levels of effort. And so when you look at all the different studies that have been conducted, and you try to boil it down to what is actually happening that could explain it, in my view and my understanding of the research and anatomy and exercise physiology, it just seems that we should be, if muscle growth is the maximum, is the goal, and we want to do it in a maximally efficient way, that we should strive to create conditions where mechanical tension is high.
Right. Would you say then, because my original understanding with blood flow restriction was going on that metabolic trigger, right? Create hypoxia in the area, more metabolites. So if you're saying that it's more mechanical tension, would it be more accurate to call them mechanical tension cuffs as opposed to blood flow restriction? Because it's creating that compression and longer tension over time with less load needed because it's creating that external pressure.
Well, what BFR does in the simplest of sense is accelerate normally occurring fatiguing processes that would happen with light load exercise or heavy load exercise. So for example, like this is the punchline really, where if there were different mechanisms, then we would anticipate, number one, if we isolate those mechanisms, that we would get an effect. Or if we add on those mechanisms, for example, they've also injected lactate into limbs and have shown no impact of growth, right? What BFR does is it takes exercise that would normally take, if we're using light loads, which is typically what's done with blood flow restriction, right? 20 to 40% of the 1 rep max. It's taking exercise that would normally take 100 reps to reach volitional failure, and it gets them there at 40 to 50% of that. So 40 to 50 reps, right? If you look at what's happening in the actual muscle fiber itself, they're identical at task failure. So it's not doing anything special other than it's reducing oxygen delivery to the exercising limb, preventing venous return, which then creates a situation where those metabolites that were normally produced during exercise, they're not able to escape because of venous congestion and decreased oxygenation, and thus this creates a higher amount of metabolic stress within the working tissue per rep.
Right.
Meaning, like, every rep, I'm getting more metabolic stress at the same load than I would get without BFR.
Right.
But they get to the same endpoint. And when you get to the same endpoint, those physiologic conditions at the muscle fiber level are identical, regardless of with or without blood flow restriction at whatever load you're using. Doesn't matter. The muscle fibers that are recruited at the end of that exercise are undergoing identical physiologic environments. So so BFR is not unique in the sense of the cuff is creating compression or anything. It's simply creating an environment where peripheral muscle fatigue accumulates at a much greater capacity.
Gotcha.
And that has huge implications for rehabilitation. When individuals are pain and or load compromised, not able to lift moderate to higher weights, so there needs to be a situation there needs to be a circumstance that we can then say, okay, if it's going to take me 100 reps to get this muscle fatigued because I can't lift heavier, what can I do to meaningfully accelerate the accumulation of fatigue to be able to get there? And BFR is that solution.
Yeah, that's where I see a lot of the benefits, when you have those post-op clients or patients that they can't sufficiently load the tendons, the muscles, because it's contraindicated. But is there a point where BFR might not be beneficial to the individual? So if someone's healthy, they can lift loads, they can do the eccentrics. Is there still, would you use it as in conjunction with heavy lifting, maybe on like a third block of muscular endurance or anything along those lines? Or is the training prior to going to be sufficient because they can lift sufficient loads to get the mechanical tension that's desired?
Yeah, I mean, I would think that if you can do moderate to high load exercise, it's more efficient, it's more tolerable. However, there is evidence that combining blood flow restriction after a high load exercise session can further, because again, what are you doing? You're adding volume without joint loading. So more volume, if your program is not giving you sufficient volume to fully saturate the anabolic signaling, then adding blood flow restriction on top of that will kind of top off the molecular cascade to be able to get you whatever that maximal growth stimulus is going to be. So there's evidence in collegiate athletes, I mean, even in very competitive athletes, for adding that as part of a strength and conditioning program to be able to complement what's currently, what they're currently doing. But I would strongly suggest against the sole use of blood flow restriction if you have the capacity to lift heavier. I think BFR is an extremely effective tool if you have musculoskeletal pain, because typically when you have pain, you actually are going to de-recruit some of your high threshold motor. You're not going to be able to access them. So what happens is, even if you think you're getting a good workout when you have a joint that's in pain, the likelihood is you're not fully recruiting that muscle that governs that joint. So it's not like you're wasting your time, but you're not getting the maximal benefit and the maximal stimulus that you can get. So if you offload it, and you can push with blood flow restriction, you can now get a better fully recruited and fully stimulated muscle. But also, because it's uncomfortable, you can actually get down regulation of pain. So a lot of the use cases for healthy athletes with nagging joint pain would be to do a series of BFR prior to moderate to higher loads to allow for this hypoalgesia to take effect and fully recruit your muscles.
Oh, that's interesting, because it's like you're resetting the threshold for pain, so you're down regulating that signal so that they can push heavier.
Yeah, correct.
That way. That's interesting. Yeah, because we know pain is inhibitory, and the nervous system's always going to down regulate the system to protect the system.
Exactly, and that's part of the reason why this dogma in bodybuilding of no pain, no gain is actually one of the stupidest things that you could do, because at least stupidest things you can do if you're looking to maximize muscle growth. is because it doesn't matter. Our body is going to reach failure when we exceed our maximum tolerable perception of effort, which can, be impacted by a number of different things. So if maximal muscle hypertrophy is the goal, we want to put our body in as much of a favorable position to, have the brakes off, not have the brakes on and try to power through it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because, again, the no pain, no gain scenario, people associate pain as a go signal. I'm like, it's a stop signal. Your brain's going to literally start shutting you down and you're going to decrease force output. So it's counterintuitive, but people think, well, more is better. And I'm glad you brought up the point of, using BFR as in conjunction with heavy lifting, because some people might hear this and be like, oh, I don't need to lift heavy. I'm just going to do BFR all the time. But, the point is hypertrophy, they're still going to miss the mechanical tension that the tendons and the joints and everything else needs around it. But, what's
cool, and that's challenging our understanding of multiple tissue adaptations is we currently have multiple papers on the patellar and the Achilles tendon that a 20 to 35% BFR program produces identical tendon responses as a progressively overloaded 70 to 85% without BFR over 13 to 14 weeks. Okay. And again, that's not to say that BFR is something that is going to treat the physical properties of the tendon. I think it's nice that we have pretty decent study evidence in multiple tendons now that suggests that. But what I take away from that is, again, what I just said, which is BFR could be a temporary solution to address tendon properties. Now, whether it translates to tendinopathies, we also have evidence that suggests that it can help clinically, but it just means that we can use BFR as a substitute. If you're really having a reactive tendon for one reason or another, and you want to use BFR and feel like you're not losing any ground, that's an option. We also have evidence that post-surgically, it's pretty openly acknowledged phenomena that muscles atrophy very quickly following any surgery. But what's a less recognized is tendon stiffness goes down and muscle bone density goes down. Yeah. And we already have evidence on following ACL reconstruction that compared to without BFR, like the same program without BFR, the BFR in addition to exercise following ACL reconstruction preserved bone mineral density at the distal femur and proximal fibula, which is exciting because what that does is that says that BFR also has the capacity to impact that tissue type. Now, again, it's not a replacement, it's a solution temporarily. Yeah. And I think that's where people kind of get excited about, they just jump on the bandwagon of BFR, and I think that's great. And I do think it's a nice tool, but it's just that. It's a tool that can be fit appropriately or inappropriately in a training program depending on its application.
Yeah. And the studies that you were mentioning with regards to tendon adaptation, were those post-op or deconditioned tendons, or were they completely
healthy tendons that they were just looking at? They were just looking at the response over a significant of 12 to 14 weeks. I can't remember exactly what time period, but we know that it takes a long time for collagen synthesis to occur between stimulation and adaptation. Yeah. So when you're thinking about tendon remodeling, it takes a long period of time versus muscle that can adapt a little bit quicker. So you get into situations where the tendon doesn't adapt as quickly as the muscle. So in things like in situations where there's anabolics, you're more likely to rupture a tendon because the difference in adaptation speeds, despite the administration of the drugs.
Yeah, we see that. We see that quite often. Like I tell, just in simplistic terms, to give clients and athletes an idea of healing times or adaptation times. We're like, yeah, muscles will start to change in 6 to 8 weeks, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I need to change my nomenclature, but I'm like, tendons, ligaments, joints take 6 to 9 months. Like, just to kind of give them an idea of the lack of blood flow or the lack of nutrients in those tissues. It just takes more time and tension to create that collagen synthesis. Is that pretty accurate? Like, is that a decent analogy that I can use, or do I need to change my timelines?
Yeah, I think
it's not.
I think we can observe.
Yeah.
So there's the idea that high load exercise is going to create neural adaptations and then muscle adaptations.
Yeah.
And then BFR, we do have evidence to show that relationship is kind of flipped. We actually can see muscle adaptations quicker than neural adaptations.
Oh, wow.
And so you can see muscle changes in as little as a couple of weeks. 6 to 8 weeks is more the traditional paradigm and what I tell everyone. Yeah. But again, I think the concept is accurate in the sense that we need to have an appreciation for the different speeds at which our bodies adapt to a stressor. And once we do that, then it can kind of inform our training plans, inform our responses if we have any aches and pains and things like that.
Do you think we complicate muscle hypertrophy in training as rehab?
Yes. Yes. I think, and this is the challenge that I have as a blood flow restriction, training educator, which is I've spent considerable time. I've pursued mentorships. I've, read tons of articles and leveraged plenty of AI quizzing.
Yeah.
Right? Which is something, by the way, I recommend every single person do, which is AI is very good at synthesizing themes. Yeah. It's not good at recalling research, but it's very good at synthesizing overall bodies of evidence. So you can really thoroughly test your knowledge of different areas of physiology and training, etc. But I think that people just want to be told what to do. And I've trained thousands of clinicians, both in person and through my online course offerings. And that's a common theme. It's not everyone, but it's the vast majority of people just want to be told, hey, I got to do this, this, right, and this, and then I can get that. So that's very surface level. Understanding the complexity and being able to simplify that complexity is the biggest skill you can have. Yeah. And it takes a long period of time. So when people all of a sudden try to get into blood flow restriction, they see these things like the hormonal response to exercise, systemic effects of blood flow restriction, the different ways in which we can apply it for all these different contexts. And they don't spend time understanding normal exercise and the responses to normal exercise and what the body, the adaptation profile of normal exercise is before they try to make it more complex with and obfuscate it a little bit with blood flow restriction. So it's a huge challenge. So what happens is you get a ton of individuals on social media that have no idea what they're doing. They are just good at packaging material. They might be so off base, but at the end of the day, they get clicks because the general public is just not super knowledgeable, nor do they really have to be. But I would imagine that if you're working in fitness and you're working in rehab, you would have some, enough respect for yourself to spend time to learn these things, certainly before you try to educate other people on what's going on.
I want to take a quick break from today's episode to share something I believe every rehab and performance professional should know about. For years, I saw too many clients go through the same cycle: short-term fixes, temporary relief, and then the same issues coming back again. That's why I built the Advanced Movement Therapist certification. It's not just another course, it's a system that helps you identify the real cause of a client's pain, give them results that actually last, and stand out in a crowded industry. You'll get practical tools and strategies that you can take straight into your sessions so you can help people get better faster. If you're ready to become the go-to clinician in your community, head to amtcertified.ca to learn more. That's amtcertified.ca. Your clients will thank you. Yeah, I mean, you can understand people be like, just tell me what to do. There's so much information out there, and there's so much noise. I empathize that just tell me a path, show me a plan. But like you said, if they don't dive into the fundamental principles, the framework of something, and then create an organized system and critical thinking around it, then you truly don't understand. You're just parroting something somebody said, and then wonder why. Well, shit. It worked on these 5 people, but it didn't work on these 5 people. Why? Well, because you didn't have a deeper understanding of this to apply it in a more simplistic, more structured way, right? It's a common theme. We see that across all the industry. What I see with clinicians is they underload. They in physio school, I don't know how it is in the US. I think it might be getting better with some schools. There's only 12 here in Canada. They're giving TheraBands and little 5-pound dumbbells. I'm like, how about deadlift? Like, why aren't we pushing and pulling stuff? But they're so afraid to load because they don't want to flare. I'm like, yeah, but now you're showing that our profession is ineffective at treating people because you're not creating adaptation. How do you get around that? The people, the clinicians, the coaches that you teach, how do you get them away from being scared to load? Or maybe you have some that jump into too much complexity too soon. How do you get them to critically think about the person in front of them?
It's tough because I'm in a unique situation where I am cash pay, and for better or worse, I have a reputation, and so people are coming to me after seeing other therapists, other providers, or wanting to not have surgery.
Yeah.
So they're very motivated, and it's a little bit different. Yeah. The difference in commercial physical therapy practices is that it is a business, sure, right? So I've talked to many therapists where they need to maintain a certain amount of patients seen per week. Yeah. If they are going to get a bonus, maintain their employment. And so it's such an ironic thing that the physical therapy industry has been in. And it's not new. This is not a new phenomena. But people come to see us because they're in pain. And that pain is impacting a part of their life. And we as physical therapists are so afraid that they're in pain, because if we do something that even in the short term might increase their pain, they're still a paying customer. They can go elsewhere.
Yeah.
And that's the pressure that exists in commercial, in-network physical therapy practices. And I feel for them, because it is something that still is a factor in my business, which is I say to people, I was like, I've been a personal trainer before I was a physical therapist. I am a personal trainer that's a physical therapist, not a physical therapist that's a personal trainer. And that framework is because exercise is such an important tool that I have at my disposal, but it's not my only tool. No. And I think it's just really tough to understand. I mean, people know, like, that's the thing. I probably 5 to 7 years ago, before I really started teaching like in person and doing workshops and really like getting around, maybe it was like I started in late 2018. So what, 7, 8 years now. I thought that therapists just don't really know how to load.
Yeah.
And I still believe that to a point, but I think the reasoning is different. The reason why they don't know how to load, or the majority of therapists don't really know how to load, is not because they don't want to. It's because the business model and the constraints that they're in right now are such that if people are in pain, they're not going to come back.
Right.
And that is unfortunate reality of our profession. And I love being a physical therapist. I love going to work every day. I do something different every day, and no day looks the same. But my clients are they're expecting a certain level of care, but I always inform them that, like, listen, this is just as much of an art as it is a science. I don't think, see, this is where, the physical therapist profession differs from something like a physiatrist.
Right.
Physiatrist is very much science, less art.
Yeah.
Certainly whatever percentage of art it would be is much, 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 much less than what we're dealing with on a daily basis, which is understanding psychosocial dynamics, understanding the tissue healing properties, understanding pain science, understanding what this person's attitude and beliefs are about their condition, about exercise in general, and about pain, and trying to figure out what's an exercise prescription or a movement prescription that they can do that's not going to, put off these alarm bells, which might say that things are not moving in the way that they should. And that's the challenge. So, like, I used to feel a lot worse about the profession because I'm like, why aren't people just deadlifting or doing bench press or like really trying to like overload the system? But it's more complex than that. And it's just the reality of the profession. And I don't think that there's any solution.
I know it works differently in the U.S. than Canada, where I'm up in. But do you feel that your background in the personal training, bodybuilding, prior to PT, gave you that perspective and that advantage into truly understanding what exercise does?
Yes. I've always, and the way that I teach is always through a muscle hypertrophy lens. Yeah. Why? Because the more muscle tissue we have, the healthier and harder to kill we are. Yes. Just facts. Yeah. So if we understand that muscle is not just an aesthetic organ, it's a metabolic organ that assists in anti-inflammation, then that is the most important thing. It just so happens that bodybuilders take the aesthetic desire to much higher levels than are actually needed in order to be metabolically beneficial. In fact, they could take it to a level where it actually creates much more demand on the heart to be able to perfuse all this muscle tissue, that then they cause issues that are separate from the beneficial effects of having more muscle mass. So I do believe that my history of bodybuilding, personal training does inform my practice tremendously, but it should, again, it's like, this is my knock on the profession. It's like we're musculoskeletal experts, but then we should understand muscle function from backwards and forwards. We don't need to understand molecular cascades and the milieu associated with that, but we should understand what a sarcomere is, actin and myosin, tighten, understand dynamics of the different types of contractions, what's happening at the tendon level, all this other stuff, because all of that informs how we're going to prescribe exercise. Yeah. And so if we're getting into a situation where we're now dealing with an additional layer, which is pain, which is probably the most powerful layer, because pain can make rational people irrational. It's really, really, really important. So the way that I teach is always through a strength and conditioning lens, understanding what's happening at the muscle fiber level, and then you layer on until you get to the whole muscle level. And I think that that can help make clinicians a lot more comfortable with their exercise prescription, which is by far the most, grade A evidence that we have for inducing positive musculoskeletal, and treatment effects.
Yeah, I mean, you've also had the opportunity over many years to use yourself as a guinea pig, to see how your body's responding to a certain movement or exercise. And then bodybuilders are some of the most in tune athletes to know if something's growing, if they can feel the muscle, creating that mind muscle connection to create that neurological response as well. But then also realizing, well, this one exercise can help out 5 different things or 5 different conditions. And that's, I come from the same background, an AT, personal strength coach, and then into PT. But having, a decade plus behind my PT career in the gym, then it just gave me that greater appreciation. Like, this is my number one tool. And we tell clients, like, look, the clinical side here, where you get your dry needling and your manual therapy and your stretching and all that, that's the side that helps you feel good and makes you feel better. We go to the gym side, the performance side, this is where you get better. And setting the expectations early on and educating them of, like, this is where we're going to end up. You're getting off my table and we're loading you. You're going to lift stuff, you're going to carry stuff, you're going to crawl, you're going to get on the balance beam, because you need to get in the real world again. So setting that expectation. But as clinicians, I feel that we need to get in there and do it ourselves. And we have a hard rule at our facility. I said, you don't teach something unless you have a level of proficiency that you can do it and demonstrate it. Because if you're demonstrating something and you falter, how much confidence are you giving your patient? How much confidence are you giving your client that they can do it when their coach can't do it? So I tell people, I'm like, you don't teach something unless you have a deeper understanding of what it's doing, and then that you can show it proficiently. Mm-hmm. So it's that practice what you preach, but you prescribe what you practice.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I want to get into, so we talked a lot about blood, and you answered a lot of my questions on the BFR. I think, you have a depth of knowledge in that, obviously. I want to talk about this little toy here, your gripper. What got you involved with this? And I love this thing, by the way. I can pick this up. I got an old cranky elbow with damage done in the past, and working at a computer, elbow gets tight, but I know it's not a stretching problem. I know it's a strength issue through full range of motion. And I pick this up and I do a couple of twists and some isometric holds through that full range of motion, and it just butters up the elbow. Where did you find this? And what's your goal with the Sports Gripz revolution?
Take over the world.
There it is. It's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been into forearm strengthening, grip. I think it's one of the first things that people learn about you, which is a handshake, and you can definitely have preconceived notions of people that have weak handshakes, and so I've always been an advocate of grip strength. Plus, with the bodybuilding, trying not to make my grip be a limiter in the exercises. So I've always looked for new, better, tools, technologies to be able to implement in my grip strengthening. So my dad is kind of the same, and he found this company in his travels, Sport Gripz, that was owned by a solopreneur, and they've been releasing products since the early 2010s, and have been, developed quite a niche following. And these are more hardcore grip and forearm strengthening products. These are for the people that are looking for top of the line premium, but also highly resistive devices. And so he ended up buying a couple of their products and been using them. And during COVID, when I moved back home to film my blood flow restriction online course, we would also work out. I would work out with my brother and my dad, and then part of the workouts, he would bring out this device, not this one, but another device that was, the Pro Extreme that was released by Sport Gripz, and I loved it. I thought it was really cool, able to get high levels of resistance, portable, felt good in the hands, and that's kind of where it lasted for a little while. I started to bring it into my clients because, once I find something that I really like, I want to share it with my audience, but also my clients. And that also gives me a better indication of transferability. So if they can use it and they feel benefits, it's not just my meathead ass that's loving it. It's more translating to more of the general populace. Yeah. And so I brought it to all my clients, and I'm very fortunate. I live in the city, so New York City, and so my clients are relatively affluent, and so I see a lot of CEOs, executives, and I started to notice that, hey, like they would buy the units, and then it would just sit in their office, and they would do on Zoom calls. Or kind of what you just did, which is it's portable. You're able to crank it up a little bit, yep, and do your thing. And one of the clients, he owns a hedge fund, and he was he loved the product. He brought it into his office, and everyone was using it. And basically, the opportunity came where the founder of the company unfortunately was having some health issues, wanted to get out, and I presented the opportunity, and he was looking to get out, and I presented the opportunity to my client, and he's like, I'll buy the company, just come up with a business plan and execute it. And he trusted me just because he knew me through not only a clinician, but also just my ventures in the blood flow restriction space, knew I was a grinder, entrepreneur. And so we ended up taking over the company back in 2024 and redesigned the most entry, mainstream product that they had. It's to be honest, it's a great product, but it's not my favorite. That's what's exciting about the whole thing is we have cool units like this. You can't even see with the, there we go.
Oh, yeah.
So this is radial and ulnar.
Yeah.
And it's so heavy that you cannot, it's 4 pounds, but you can't, once you get heavy enough, there's no way you're going to be able to twist it. But this is a unique product. Yeah. We also have the T6, which is a massive one here. So talk about size difference.
Yeah, from the 2.0.
Right?
Wow.
So it's really cool that we launched with a product that is great, and we redid it. So we worked on the internals a little bit, made it a little bit more resistive, changed the feedback. So for this is our premium black unit in laser engraving. But we changed the grip, so people were saying that with our old unit, they would slide a little bit. So we wanted to make a little bit of ridges in the unit so we can grip it and rip it. And so we went through a little growing pains on our end. Again, first time understanding manufacturing, things like that. But now we're finally on our feet again, and we sold 45% more units than we projected in the first year. Yeah, we crushed it. Crushed our first year expectations, and we're on our way to crush our second year expectations. And this product isn't for everyone. This product is for people that are looking for premium, top of the market, American made grip strength products. If you are fine with doing dumbbells, go ahead, man. Like nobody is. I mean, I just did dumbbells this morning. I was doing 75-pound wrist curls with dumbbells, 2 sets of 8. By all means, go for it. Do it. You get that if you can. But like people that are on the go that want something that is scalable to high levels of resistance, and they don't want to carry around a dumbbell or a wrist roller, for example, like these are the people that we're marketing to. The garage gym crews, the people that want like the really cool equipment for their own garage gym. Perfect, done. Because yeah, this is a premium product. We sell between $185 and $199 per unit, but it's American made, and it should last you a lifetime. And we have a limited lifetime warranty, so if something happens to it that's covered under the warranty policy, we'll replace it for you, no problem. It's just the best. It's literally the best in the market. I mean, I've tried like everything, and I wouldn't put my name behind something I didn't firmly believe in. And that's what's exciting about it, is that the reception of the unit has been really outstanding, and it's great knowing that we got our it's like this is the leadoff hitter, in baseball, and we still got our 3, 4, 5 batters coming up, and it's just exciting that this is where we're at, and it was cool because we had a major influencer post our product unprompted, and then I guess somewhere along the lines, Rogue Fitness saw our product, reached out to us, and now we're on Rogue.
That's awesome.
And we're doing great so far, and we've only been out for a week. So if this is by any indication of where things are going, the future is very bright for Sport Gripz.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited for you. I love the product. Yeah, so I'm grateful that you sent it my way, and I'm happy to promote it because it's a great product, like you said. And plus, you can carry it around, and it's a protective piece of equipment.
Yeah, you just don't want to take it on TSA. I got lucky. I went to a conference last week, and I was like, you know what?
Oh, no.
I'm gonna risk it. I'm gonna risk it all. And I did, because I didn't want to check a bag because I was doing a transfer, so I took it. I was lucky they didn't take it away, but I do know of multiple people that have tried to carry it on and have gotten it taken away because it's characterized as a blunt force weapon in some ways. So just check it if you're going to travel with it. And then if anybody is watching, did we give you a code? I think we did.
Yeah, yeah, you did, and I'll have that in the show notes for everybody.
So if people want, you get $10 off the code, and you can support your content creator, but also support me. And get a great piece of equipment. I will say one thing that's cool about the product in general. It is a family product in the sense that my dad and I are running the business, and then the investor is a silent partner. And then on top of that, our tagline, "Don't skip the grip," is actually from my wife. She does social media, like brand strategy for a major bank. And so she has these complex listening tools that basically went through and were like, what are people saying about grip training? And really there were 2 themes that people were saying. The first one is like that they don't grip train, right? They don't see the value in it for one reason or another. Yeah. And the other is like they're the calves of the lower body or the upper body. Right. So like people are like, yeah, I'll do it, but like I don't really get results because I just shove it at the end of the workout. And people are complaining about the fact that they don't, they could, because they don't do grip work, then they have to worry about the accessories because now they need it for their training. And so she came up with the phrase, "Don't skip the grip."
Nice. Because
it's true. Yeah. And people don't have time to strength train. So our protocol is very simple. It's 20 seconds on, 40 seconds off at whatever resistance you're going to use, 20 seconds as hard as you can do it. Yeah. We're trying to drive up those metabolites to induce high levels of muscle fatigue, which can then create the strength response in the exercising muscle. And we do that 3 times. So the whole thing takes 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So it's something that you can do at your desk in between calls, and you ready to get your whole form as exercise, because These are independent handles, so it gives you resistance on both ends.
Yeah.
So you can do wrist flexion and extension. You can also do pronation and supination, so the T-grip. So there's a lot of cool things you can do, and hell, you can even do one of the other physical therapists actually showed me one where you can do intrinsic hand strengthening. So obviously this is you go here and pull up.
Yep.
So now you're getting the lumbricals and the interossei. So it's really cool because you get that nice novel movement. So what we're doing as a company is we're putting in resources to now standardize the level of resistance. So you're going to know what level you're working at, and that's really where once we have that information, then we're going to really blow up rehab. Right now we're predominantly targeting fitness, and so it's been fun. It's been cool. It's been
awesome. Yeah. What people need to understand though, doing the grip work here versus out here, it's creating a different kinetic signaling from hands to elbows to shoulders, fascial chains, all the, it's challenging a little bit differently. If you're a little bit more of a tighter elbow out here, it's going to add a little bit more challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's awesome. And people, they undervalue the value of grip strength, because even though it's a proxy for longevity, but if you have a weak grip, you can't do pull-ups, you can't lift heavy things, you can't hang on, and you can't do anything with grip. I mean, people say, yeah, it's the calves, but it's the same. If you have weak feet, well,
yeah,
nothing on top of that foundation is going to work. So as soon as your hands hit the ground or connected to something, you're limited to what your grip can do.
Mm-hmm.
And if your grip is weak, well, the whole body's weak. The nervous system just shuts it down and drops stuff.
Yeah,
So,
you don't want to be weak.
No, that's we're constantly in this battle with entropy and degradation in our bodies, and we always have to kind of create those signals to fight against it.
Mm-hmm.
But Nick, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the work you're doing. Your products are awesome. I share it with everyone I know. I've brought it into the clinic. The clinicians love it. So where can people find you?
If they want Sport Gripz, they can find me at Sport Gripz, literally SPORTGRIPS on Instagram. If you want any information on my clinic, what I think about personal training, physical therapy, etc., my Instagram handle is TAG HPM, Human Performance Mechanic, which is my clinic name. And if you want any information on blood flow restriction, the BFR Pros. So awesome. All on Instagram. That's predominantly where I'm at. And yeah, again, appreciate the opportunity to just come on here, have a chat, and hopefully your listeners found some value.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Staying Relevant. If you enjoyed it, check out the AMT certification at amtcertified.ca, where we help clinicians and coaches get better results faster. Don't forget to subscribe for more episodes and share this with a coach, clinician, or athlete who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep staying relevant.